Good evening, good evening, good evening. I'm trying to adjust the size of me on the screen. Let me show you what I see. See, I'm trying to adjust the size of me on the screen. Y'all give me a hot second. I don't know why I was that big. Well, we're going to sit down and I'm going to thank y'all for coming in this evening to AfriStream. Yes, AfriStream, the Pan African news from news with hot topics from the diaspora from a Pan African perspective. I thank you for being patient and waiting. Yes, I know this is kind of off schedule, but I was told, brother, if you don't make it on time, make it. And so, yes. So I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be when I'm supposed to be. I had another brother said, you know what? The spirit happens when the spirit happens. We can't rush it, right? We can't prolong it. It just happens when it happens. And if this is the time and the moment for us to be, then so be it. So thank you for coming. Let me do a quick adjustment here. Let me drop this here. And let me put, I gotta set it up. This is technical, doing technical support. Doing technical support. Wait. And the last page. Let's go. So once again, I thank you for coming to AfriStream, where we talk about the hot trending topics within the diaspora, and we give you a Pan-African perspective. Yes, it's been a second, it's been a minute, and it's been a while. But what we're going to focus on before we get started, as we continue, you know that we are focused on giving you as much must-see live stream as possible, keeping you up to par with what is going on in the diaspora. Okay, and today's topic, we're talking about it. Today's topic is about the war effects that the Ukraine and Russia has on the continent of Africa. What effects are the war is having on the continent of Africa? And that's important. I was reading somewhere and was looking up somewhere, and I didn't necessarily pause, but they talked about how African countries are staying neutral. They're not rooting for Russia. They're not rooting for Ukraine. They have no opinion. They're staying neutral. And I said, wow, that's interesting. And then tonight I came across something that made me understand why they stay neutral. Now, as we continue, and before we continue, we will always say, if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit your like button, hit comment, and share. We are focused every time we come on live. We are focused on the rise of the African, our social Pan-African movement, where we are bringing Black people together under the one umbrella. Right, so we ask you that also, if you're watching us via YouTube, that you hit the subscribe button. And every time we go live, you hit the notification bell. So every time that we go live, you will see us. Why? Because we are always producing tons of must-see live streams. Sunday we have a Keebaland Inspirational Sunday. Tuesday nights we have the African Speaks. Thursday nights we're here. We have AfriStream, and AfriStream is Pan-African news. Fridays we have African history and African spirituality class. And so we ask you to hit the notification bell and join us always on our topics. Now, tonight's show, yes, again, we're talking about the effects that the war is having on some of the countries, 41 countries in the continent, right? And so we see the embargoes, we see everything going on, and so we're asking ourselves, and with this particular segment, it's showing you what you'll learn is, why is it important that self-determination is mandatory? Why is it so important? Because a lot of individuals in the spiritual realm, African realm, communities, very few people are sitting down and saying self-determination is need to be the main focus of our community, of our Pan-Africanism. Black community need to focus on self-determination, period. Not only just within our communities in the States, but the community of the diaspora. needs to always focus on. And that's when you talk about self-determination, we're talking about being able to give ourselves at least the basic necessities in life. The basic necessities in life. Why? Because you don't want life in or the current events of someone else's drama. I never use that word. That word is almost never in my dictionary. But we're going to use it today because European drama has always plagued the continent. European drama always plagues what happens in black people's lives, right? When European drama affects our ability to control the basic necessities in life, that's when self-determination is deeply important. And so when we talk about the basic necessities and oh, black people ain't got no problem. Well, I'm gonna ask you a question. Do you control your food source? And that's a yes or no. So if Kroger closed down, would you have something to eat? Waiting. Publix, Walmart, waiting. Could your community farm feed the black community? Waiting. Not saying that we need those farms. We need them on a large scale. Do you supply yourself with your own fresh water? Waiting. Getting it clear. I buy water. Deer Parks, that's good water. Do you supply yourself with your own shelter? I own my home. Yeah, but you pay your taxes to your home, to an institute, to a governmental institution that can take your home away if they choose. If they choose. Predatory lending, all that's real for a reason. Do you produce your own clothing? And that's the basic needs of a people: food, clothes, and shelter and clothing. And then from that point, you build on to something greater, right? Modern society, technology, development, everything. You build on to something greater. Now, as we look at this clip, I'm going to give you a reminder of what the continent of Africa is doing in its future. Not in its current state, but in its future. Because you remember, we've talked about the continent needing to produce 70% on previous shows. We've talked about the continent of Africa being able to produce 70% of its own food source in the next 15 years, 15, 20 years. And we also stated that African farmers will be the next billionaires coming out of the continent. Right. And so increasing the production of food by 70%, they will be able to feed, nations of people. Now, what we're hoping is that and that's in the process of building infrastructure. We've talked about this on AfriStream. Infrastructure so that the people can exist and utilize their own resources. We've discussed this. And so I want to give you a recap on that particular level of development before we talk about the effects of the war. And you begin to understand the need for self-determination. Let's go.
Opportunities to invest in domestic sustainable food and agriculture have grown dramatically in the last decade. Considering Africa's rising income levels and high population growth rate, food demand will skyrocket in the medium term, creating new opportunities for agricultural investment and growth in this sector. The urgency on Africa's food production to satisfy demand will necessitate significant investment to ensure food security, as Africa is the only region that has yet to experience a green revolution.
Now, we talk about the Green Revolution. And every other continent and country was able to have a green revolution, meaning developing the technologies it needed for the basic necessity of food. Even in that green revolution, we're going to talk about irrigation water. So those are infrastructures that takes care of a people. Sorry about that. Where we at? Right here. I didn't know that was almost out. Those are infrastructures that takes care of a people. And so without that, a people is relying on everyone else for food and water. Fresh water. And we talk about that with water being all in Africa and around Africa. How is it that we have so many areas in Africa without fresh water? Again, colonialization still has its effects on the motherland. And so despite that you don't see the colonial powers controlling things, the mark of colonialism is still there and the effects of colonialism are still there. So when you're looking at your brothers and sisters across the pond, look with a sympathetic eye, listen with a sympathetic ear, and speak about them with a sympathetic tongue. Period. Because we are the children within the African diaspora. We know where home is, or we should. In terms of where we derive from, we should. And so when we take a look at what's going on, why would you not have a green revolution in this 2022? Because it allows one country, one continent, and multiple countries in that continent to need the resources of everybody else, which keeps us in their pockets. It keeps the richest continent on the planet that has all its own resources that can survive without any imports, dependent on the exports of other countries, them buying something that they can have for themselves. Let's continue. Wait, let me get that. I gotta get down here. And so that's deeply important for us to remember and know. So all these modern cities.
Currently, small-scale farmers account for over 60% of Africa's population, whilst agriculture accounts for approximately 23% of the continent's gross domestic product. Nonetheless, much of Africa's agricultural potential remains untapped. Experts say agriculture is a low-risk investment that keeps pace with inflation and increases in value over the long term. There are many reasons why you should consider investing in agriculture in Africa, as this industry is set to create many dollar millionaires in the coming years. Our video today will present 10 reasons why investment opportunities in the agriculture sector in Africa will make more millionaires. Before we start with our 10 list, make sure to like this video.
Now, we're not going to get into the 10 different reasons because we will be here all night, right? And so it'll come. And so this particular one, if y'all remember us talking about this, when we talked about the issue of investing in the continent. Of course, anything that has to do with infrastructure, anything that has to in terms of building infrastructure in the continent is going to make money. Period. If you're investing into the continent, making money with it or growing within itself. Now, if you're going to, and then you can be a foreign investor, okay, there's a African farming company or a trucking company, water company, invest in it, catch them online, international stocks. Yes, invest. Because agriculture will blow in some years. It's going to get big. And this is what we discussed. Why? Because Africa needs to become independent of all the other countries that have a hold on it. Now, we talked about the EAC, right? Now, the EAC, and we did that a couple of weeks ago, and that was, it is, and if you did, hey, how you doing? I see you, Melanated Queen, one love. The EAC is the East African Community, which is now considered the 4th largest nation in the world. Woo! The 4th largest nation in the world, the EAC. And now they're moving toward what? Self-determination. You got to get it. They said we need to come together as a group. However, there are quite a few things happening in the continent throughout this war that I was not aware of and that became aware of. And this is important for us to know. Why? Because it's going to trigger the mindset of those who live in the environment of resource, which is the United States. This is the leader of the free world, right? Area from some of the best education, right? More technology, than we TikTok and having parties rather than using it to build, right? Why? Because slave mindset. Y'all need to tune into the African Speaks. We'll give you a dose of that black reality and ways to get around the confines of our conditioned thinking. That's it. But let's take a look at what is currently going on in 41 countries of Africa and how the effects is dealing with the Russian and Ukraine war. Let's go.
According to a United Nations report, Russia's war in Ukraine threatens more than 70% of Africa's economies. The African Development Bank is among a host of international organizations, which includes UN specialized agencies and development lenders, that are exploring initiatives to increase food production in Africa and
Increased food. They are suffering. They said the war is affecting more than 70% of Africa's economies. How is that? And we never get it. Why would you say, I want to stay neutral to this war? What Russia does, what Ukraine does, we're going to stay neutral. We're not going to say what's good or what's bad. We're not going to talk about, we're not saying anything. Why? Because both of those countries has the continent on lockdown. That was something I didn't know. Let's continue.
mitigate the potential of a heavy toll on the African continent. In March, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres announced the formation of the 32-member UN Global Crisis Response Group, where he chairs members that constitute the heads of the various organizations. Its first brief, released on Wednesday in New York, discovered that 41 African countries are at high risk of experiencing at least one emergency as a result of the war. During a virtual press conference, Guterres warned that the war was supercharging a three-dimensional crisis under the food, energy, and finance sectors, and that some of the world's most vulnerable people, countries, and economies were being battered.
Now, food, definitely a necessity for people to live. Energy. So we talking, it could be solar energy, it could be water energy, right? Or just regular energy. Who doesn't have? I mean, I wouldn't even. That's the dark ages when you're talking about energy on behalf. I'm sorry because I'm getting into this thing, so my background might fade out. So we're gonna make sure we get that. That's heavy when you're talking about 70%. I don't want to go back to the dark ages and not have energy. And then the financial sector, and when you're dealing with finances in a community that is not self-sustained, you're dealing with your ability to trade in and out of your own country to make sure your people have what they need, especially since you're not self-reliant. There's no self-determination. They created a whole continent of African people that need the support of European society. Let's continue.
The Global Crisis Response Group will assist decision makers around the world in mobilizing solutions and developing strategies and recommendations to assist all countries, including the most vulnerable, in weathering interconnected crises. According to preliminary evaluation, up to 1.7 billion people in 107 economies are vulnerable.
What? 1.7 billion people in over 700 economies. That's how much this war is affecting worlds around them. When you think that the war is only between Ukraine and Russia. Now, we did a AfriStream on why Ukraine. And we did it was a whole list. Now, I used to have that list sit right here on my desk, and that particular paper and documentation is not here this evening on how powerful and how influential the Ukraine farming economy affected the world. It's in the top 5, top 10 in a lot of different areas. And so this war, them being able to export food to other areas is affecting 1.7 billion people in over 107 economies. Wow, that's a lot. When you think that, oh, it's just them over there. No, the world is interconnected. And especially if you're not self-determined. And this is why they keep control of Africa, because Africa is the only continent on the face of the planet that, if they had full use of all their resources, never have to import a thing. Think about it. So we can't have that solar power because we might need something, or we don't have a consumer. They have a consumer base. Why? You have a continent that is undeveloped. And so that is our consumer base the same way. And think about the scale. That's a global scale. We're giving you a Pan-African perspective on current news. The African American in this country is its consumer base, because we produce nothing. Nothing. So everything we purchase is coming out of their stores. They're coming off of their sheep. Every piece of wood we have come out of their timber. We don't own resource. So we're a consumer base within a country. Now you have a continent that they push down that now is a consumer base for every other country around it. Wow. You understand why it's important for Europeans to keep Africa down. But then now you understand why it's important for us to support our brothers over in the pond. Create a transatlantic business initiative where we're supporting the growth and development of towns and businesses over there with the excess in which we have here. They come over here and be like, they gotta be spoiled. And we sit over here, we don't understand how good we got it. Why? Because I can look at TikTok and tell you that. What we're building as a people, we're still sitting here suffering as individuals, and we're trying to get life on our own. Of course, the EAC, East African Community, they said we done with this. Again, the fourth largest. All of this connects. Let's continue.
To at least one of the 3 risks identified by the Global Crisis Response Group. The UN report calls for the immediate and efficient use of all existing mechanisms to assist countries directly affected by the war and its aftermath. According to Guterres, the Global Crisis Response Group's action plans are aimed primarily at Africa. African nations are among the most vulnerable to the impending crisis.
Why? Because that is the nation that the European powers kept down. Because that is the location, that is the continent, that is the consumer-based continent where you don't produce anything, but you have all the resources. Well, you don't even, you don't have the infrastructure to even utilize your resources. Then we have individuals where countries are putting in the development of governments, where European countries have created constitutions within those countries to let them think, yeah, we're gonna help you write your your constitution. Oh, and then we're gonna buy your product, and then we'll sell your product, your raw goods, and then we'll sell it back to you. Yes, that's what we're doing. Ghana had to tell Sweden, we're not giving you no more cocoa beans. What we use to create chocolate from, and the $10 billion that Switzerland makes off of Ghana. Switzerland chocolate, y'all. If y'all don't know how famous Switzerland chocolate is, y'all eating it all the time. It's the most famous, one of the most famous pieces of chocolate in the world. But all their resources come from Africa. Ghana said, "What would we do if we had a $10 billion industry? We're no longer giving you any of our resources. We're done. What you can do is buy the chocolate we produce from our own cocoa bean." So you have tons of countries in the continent suffering from this war because they have not yet had an opportunity to embrace self-determination. Because when you need food, you need clothes, and you need shelter, you don't have the infrastructure to do it. And so rulers are put in certain places to maintain European rule or hold on African countries. That's why you have rulers with money, because other governments are putting them in that place. Ain't that something? Not the EAC though. talk about it. Let's go.
Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, president of the African Development Bank Group, stated that the emergency food plan could very well build on the success of existing programs such as the African Development Bank's Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation Initiative, which has provided drought-resistant maize, heat-resistant wheat, and higher-yielding seed varieties.
Now, of course, Dr. Adesina used to be the man of the year. Y'all go take a look up Dr. Adesina and all the work he's doing in terms of the business relationships that they, and I might do a segment just on Dr. Adesina alone. And so that y'all get an understanding of men who are dealing with the issue of Africa and trying to create that self-determination experience. So he said, look, we need to upgrade how we take care of ourselves, not the import that we receive, but having enough where we're feeding ourselves and exporting it out to other countries so that we make the money. And so, of course, you talk about maize. Wait a minute. You trying to tell me y'all need corn? What? But then the heat, y'all need, heat-resistant wheat? Y'all need wheat? What? And then once you process it, you need to actually turn it into something. That's why agriculture is going to be growing big in Africa. Growing big. So if you can buy some land and go out there and farm, that's the move for those. You know what? I might have to talk to some friends about that. We might have to do this. Let's keep going.
To 11 million farmers in 29 African countries.
According to Adesina, the African Development Bank's plan will assist 40 million farmers understand what the future of Africa is going to do. Right? You got to listen to this brother's business plan and how he seeks to build Africa as a world, the African countries within it as a world power when they control its own resource, utilizing. They said it's like 60% of the land is agricultural. Agricultural is a word that I don't know. It's a word that I'm not sure of. Oh, she's right. Well, it's the way because I see you, girl. I appreciate the dialogue. Let's continue. With all the upgrades, this will be able to feed over 20 million people. And that's just not all. That's some of the upgrades. That's some of the plans that he has. But he'll be able to increase 20 million people. That goes beyond the amount of people needed to be fed. Can you imagine having an economy out of a continent that can feed 20 million people? He's not talking all of Africa. He's talking about an area. It's not all of Africa, but you can bring that together. How many more people can you feed if the whole continent is working under this particular process of self-determination and being able to feed, clothe, and house, working on their own sense of being able to take care of themselves? Let's continue. Before we start, now individuals are working on this issue, talking about this issue, and building on this issue. The UN, United Nations, and obviously you didn't see anybody from. You're not going to see an American UN ambassador speaking on much of nothing most of the time, which is crazy, right? But I want to talk about Barbados. I want to talk about Jamaica, how they're pushing out colonial powers of the UK out, and where they're saying that we want to be independent from any foreign rule. Pan-Africanism, self-determination, it's a beautiful thing. It's happening around us, but we should be aware of what's going on, and we should take heed as individuals within our own communities. Take heed to what the world is doing, the Pan-African world is doing. They're making moves over there, right? That had nothing to do with this. I just wanted to drop that because we talked about that before. Let's go.
Food, energy, and fertilizer prices have skyrocketed, raising concerns about global instability, given that Russia and Ukraine are among the world's breadbaskets.
What did you know? Russia and Ukraine export to needy countries. Their business in these rural areas, you would never know that when you're about to hear the power of Russia and Ukraine. And I had a list of all the things that, again, Ukraine ranks in the top 5, top 10 of all major agricultural exports. They're an agricultural beast when it comes to providing food to places. Let me show you what goes on. I got a chart I got to show you in a few minutes.
Guterres emphasizes the importance of having a sense of urgency, with abolished restrictions, whilst avoiding hoarding of any of the products and, most importantly, implementing the financial instruments available immediately. Russia and Ukraine supply roughly 30% of the world's wheat and barley.
What? You supply 30% of the world's wheat and barley? So wait a minute, Africa gets their wheat from Russia? What? Their barley from Russia? What? Again, when you're not self-determined, you got to rely on other people. And so if they're doing war, they're not focused on exports. If they're going at war, they're not focused on what people are sending. Then you got sanctions on Russia. So whoever Russia feeds, they not getting food. And so who's not getting food? The Africans ain't getting food because we're sanctioning Russia's movement of their resources. They're freezing the money. Africa, the 41 countries in Africa are sending the money to Russia. And it ain't moving through the banks, especially if the United States is connected to any of the banks. Ain't that something? So we got people getting hungry because of this. Let's continue.
1/5 of its maize and more than...
Now, I remember maize. You trying to tell me that 1/5 of the production of corn, so where does the other 4/5 go? Where do they come from? And I didn't look at that. We need to see who's providing what to Africa in terms of food sources.
half of its sunflower oil. At the same time, Russia is the world's largest natural gas exporter and the world's second largest oil exporter.
So, all the resources in Africa, we had not been able to find a oil resource. Now, I personally know, because of my job and my day job and what I do, always underpaid for the technology that I provide for companies. Not no more. My new job, I love my new job. I love my new plantation. Countries are going over there, setting up, and they will pay. You see there's oil's in the content. There are oil refineries, but Africa doesn't own those oil refineries. Ain't that something? They just don't. And so if you own the oil, we'll dig, but what we dig, what we find, we keep. You know what I mean? You pay us to be here. We'll give you some at a discount. What? Put them out and keep everything that they left. That's what I say. This game of chess, not checkers. And then you say gas resource number 1. What? So you're trying to tell me that and without naming a company with they have 2 letters in their name, and the first letter is a G, and as with only 2 letters, what energy company is that? Somebody told me I can't be doing that online. Said, brother, they're gonna come get you. Well, let them come. So you have it, and I remember creating communications, where they're live streaming and talking about this particular scenario where they're going over the motherland and they're looking at land that they will create towers from and create an energy source. Companies are saying this is the untapped region. If we're ready to go into the trillions, it's time for us to bring up the consumer continent of the world and blow up our dividends by giving them something that we should have allowed them to build for themselves. But no, so now they're coming in the present time where they're trying to bring Africa infrastructure. EAC had it right. Nah, we're going to do this for ourselves. We'll do this for ourselves. We'll do this for ourselves. I forgot. First time I found out that Rwanda creates its own African cell phone. It ain't Android. It ain't Apple. It's Rwanda. They're doing for themselves. Ain't that something? The people who are making the phones are the Rwandans. You don't need anything. Now you got Zuckerberg, and I'll do this one. I'll do this one next. I gotta get some things, but this is called a digital. Oh man, it'll come to me. We're gonna move on, but it's gonna hit. Uh, but we have to be careful about as we go into the digital age, and they put us into that same experience where we're going to give you technology, but we're going to own it ourselves on your land, and we'll give you a break, a percent, rather than them being self-reliant and doing it ourselves. Now, one of the things that these countries are having problems with, and this is going to be the eye opener. Well, let me let this finish first, and then I'll drop this other video.
Also, the former Soviet power exports roughly one-fifth of all fertilizers in the world, along with its neighbor Belarus. According to a United Nations...
Okay, so that means anything if you need fertilizer to plant something. And that's sad. What I want to show is, and this was the heartbreaking information, Africa's dependency on wheat from Russia and Ukraine. The red is the African countries, and the blue are the Ukraine countries. Some of these countries do business with both countries, meaning that they get their wheat from from Ukraine and Russia. So they have to stay neutral. Why? Because if we don't stay neutral in this war and have an opinion on how that's going, they won't help us feed ourselves. Ain't that something? And that's ridiculous. They have a stronghold on African countries, but for the food source. This is why when you hear African countries are staying neutral from the war, certain African countries, because they don't control basic necessities. And certain necessities that they need come from these two countries. Ain't that something? Now, if we can see this on a Pan-African scale of the importance of self-determination, it shouldn't matter who's fighting in the corner. If you can feed, clothe, and house yourself, you can educate your kids, you can build, you can increase and spend on technologies. When you have when everything is self-contained, and you can do business with who you want to, when you want to. Why? Because you don't have a need. The African continent is the only continent that can, if it was completely self-sustained, would need not to take any imports from anybody and could feed the globe. So why wouldn't it? Why? Because individuals, European societies don't believe in communalism. They believe in power. Communalism is an African concept where you give as you're able and you take as you have need. And that's how we built major African civilizations. Today, this Pan-African perspective on this war, we have to be conscious, deeply conscious, that we move towards self-determination in all levels of our lives. Even education, legal system, all of it, healthcare. We have to be self-reliant, because if they go to war with each other, we don't want to have an issue of eating. We don't want to have an issue of putting clothes on our backs. We don't want to have an issue of drinking fresh water. Just the simple things in life. If they go to war, ain't that something? Another country goes to war, a distant country can't eat. So we here in Americas, if all the farms shut down and the grocery stores shut down, how do we eat comfortably knowing that We can. Ain't that something? That's why my church, Pan African Orthodox Christian Church, Shrines of the Black Madonna, we are the largest black farm owners in the United States. And we are focused on developing that farmland so that when situations like this arise, you can't tell us we can't have food. Animals on the farm, shaving the wool, processing the wood, you can't tell us we don't have clothes. We have timber that we've sold timber to different organizations to money. You can't tell us we have shelter. Food, clothes, shelter. Energy. We talking about that now. What would it take to build our own energy resources? Solar farming. That's big. That's big. There are certain farms that they have no relationship to an energy company. They produce their own energy. Ain't that something? 75,000, put it on your farm, and after you pay off what your overhead is, everything else is a profit, and you can sell energy back to the state in which you're in. I'm working with my daughter to create a project because her family on her mom's side has acreage in Mississippi. Solar farming. Energy. When they fight, we should still eat food, clothes, shelter. Self-determination is a must. Hopefully, not only do you see it necessary over here, but you also see it everywhere else and in the motherland. With that being said, hopefully this has informed you and left you with a Pan-African perspective. If so, let's build. Let's be a community. Let's grow. With that, we'll see the African rise. Let me drop that so you'll see it. With that, we will watch the rise of the African. Self-determination is the key. Y'all have a blessed night.